The few, the strong, the proud, the ones who have the stamina to hold out for the last session. I'm really excited for this session, actually. I think this is going to be a fantastic fireside chat where we really get to lean into it. I love the guests we have to moderate and our two panelists. This is going to be fantastic. So thank you all for hanging in there. It's been a day packed full of information. My brain is full, and I'm assuming yours is as well. And of course, we've got the gala for tonight, so I'm excited about that. Without any further ado, I would like to introduce our final panel, our fireside chat for the day, with our moderator, Mr. Phil Hoetger. Phil has 23 years of policing experience with the Calgary Police Service. Phil is the commander of the Technical Investigations Section, where he oversees cybercrimes, digital forensics, economic crimes, money laundering, electronic surveillance, robbery, and arson. Throughout his career, he has undertaken extensive advanced police training and has served as senior multi-agency positions. Phil serves on a number of local and national police committees and boards and is currently co-chair of National Police Service Cybercrime Committee. Please give a big round of applause and welcome our next and final panel to the stage. Gentlemen.
Awesome. Thanks to everybody who stayed to hang out and hear our last presentation, discussion, fireside chat with no fire. We were kind of a little bit worried about that in the back, but we'll make it work without a fire for sure. So I'd like to introduce my two co-panelists here, Tyler Argue. Tyler's fun fact is that he has an irreparable slice in his golf game. So I'm going to ask you a fun fact about golf later. I don't know if that's too much pressure or not, but Tyler's
worse than that.
Okay, mine's much worse than a slice in a golf game too. So, Tyler's the Vice President of Risk Control Canada, and then Julian Klemochko, Founder, CEO, and Chief Investment Officer of Accelerate. Fun fact for Julian is that he's long been a supporter of innovative new asset classes. Julian launched both Canada's first Bitcoin fund in 2017 and Canada's first NFT fund in 2022. Anything about golf you want to throw in there?
I wish I could consistently slice it, but it's maybe going sideways, backwards, who knows.
I don't even want to get out of the tee box sometimes. So anyway, thank you both for joining me. Thank you everybody for coming. So this panel, we're going to talk about meeting the challenges of edge device security, which I love this first sentence here. Cybercrime is one of the fastest growing industries in the world, and I struggle to say industry as a word with cybercrime. But certainly the counter to it, cybersecurity, I would say, is a fast-growing industry and something that we've all got to pay attention to. So I love this topic, edge devices, regular devices, any device. We've got lots of challenges. I'll start right into the first question. I think we'll bounce this around a lot through the next 45 minutes and have lots of fun. So our first question is, our billions of connected devices are enabling smarter technologies that benefit our businesses and daily lives. But each device creates a vulnerability to bad actors. In your opinion, is this risk growing, and what devices are the most common targets? I'm happy with whoever would like to start.
Sure, I could kick things off. Thanks, Philip, and excited to chat here with Tyler. And so I can tell you about where I run into security issues and other things that I see in my day job. So I've been running investment products for digital assets, Bitcoin, Web3, NFTs, and we could debate this, but I don't think there's any place online that has more security risks than NFTs. I regularly see so many scams, frauds, rug pulls, phishing attacks. My God, they're like never ending. And I've been hacked personally before, and it's not a fun experience. So I think this problem is getting more significant over time, and it's much of a cat and mouse game. It seems like as technology progresses and new innovations come out, the hackers and the scammers out there, they get more and more clever, and there's seemingly new scams and attacks coming out every single day, and some get increasingly difficult to protect yourself against. And even just regularly in your job, some of the phishing attacks that we see via email are becoming very, very innovative themselves, and they can be tricky to get past. So certainly solutions are needed, and there's a lot of good solutions out there to prevent these types of attacks, but boy, they're getting tricky.
Yeah. I think there was somebody on the previous panel that said innovation in Alberta is going at the side, or should be going at the pace of traffic on Deerfoot, but I think that's the pace of scams that we're seeing in cybersecurity and particularly in edge device security. Yeah, I think it is growing, and I don't know if it's the scams that are growing or we're just, because innovation is growing so much, it's just, I think that COVID had something that, a hand in this, helping people are working from home now, right? So when you think of what edge device security is, and frankly, some people might not know, and that's totally fine. So when you have edge device security, it's the extension of the security of your corporation outside of the walls of the business, into your home or into your remote working spaces. And we saw this, fairly often within COVID, is people are working from home now, and all these companies are trying to keep up with these new health orders. Now all these people are working from home and they haven't taken the time to adopt new security measures for the devices that are taken out of the office, right? So yeah, to answer the question, I think it is growing, and we're seeing that at a fast pace.
Yeah, thanks for that. And Julian, I think of your comment having been hacked, and I think we've all, probably received 4 or 5 CRA calls this morning, even though the CRA is on strike, somehow they still want to arrest me. But the leaders of industry are at risk, potentially. And so then I think of, from a local law enforcement perspective, grandma and grandpa or mom and dad or, my sister or whatever, they would call and say, hey, what is this? Or what is that? Or, how do I secure my router? Or all these sorts of questions that, personally I feel that shouldn't be difficult for the average consumer. It should be somehow sort of made fairly easy, fairly foolproof, no default passwords, all that kind of stuff, and few checks and balances, whether it's two-factor or whatever, to try and help give people that pause for thought, because now you don't need to walk to the ATM anymore, right? You can make a big difference right from computers. So anything to add? Sorry.
Yeah, and so part of your question was how can you better secure, right? And so the things that are at risk when you are working in a remote setting, the things that we're seeing that are getting hit probably the most is smartphones, smart home devices. You're seeing homes now that are completely integrated on the Internet of Things, and yeah, I mean everything it seems like exasperated. Again, I go back to COVID, but looking back at the Colonial hack, you probably familiar with that a couple years ago, right? It's not just people in workspaces that are working from home now, it's even the industrial setting. So
yeah, there's been a number of notable hacks over the years of like into an HVAC system and then lateral movement into the point of sale systems, or those types of things. So it's not like, to over exaggerate, hacking my light bulb doesn't pose a risk to other things within my house, right? And whether that's industrial or regular consumers, for sure. Cool. I'll pop on to the next question, which certainly relates, but and I didn't confirm this stat, but I'm surprised it wouldn't even be much higher. Studies show that nation states commit a shocking 20% of all cybercrime, and many other operations have access to sophisticated government origin technologies. How can businesses defend themselves against these kinds of advanced threats?
I think it should be pointed out that that's probably largely North Korea and Russia, where most of these attacks are coming from, and they're just notorious in the digital asset space for running all sorts of scams and taking hundreds of millions of dollars in cryptocurrency annually, which is significant, and there's a lot of ways to prevent that, and when talking about digital security, number one is the actual physical device, and so we're always concerned about how you're securing that physical device, whether a laptop, a PC, digital currency wallet, like you want those secure, and that's before any of the software stuff, before any of the phishing checks and things of that nature. And then with respect to phishing, I always say if it's too good to be true, it probably is. No, you're not getting anything for free. They're asking for your credit card information or your keys for your digital currency wallets. And there's always these scams that are coming along that seek to give something for free to someone without them having to do anything, and that literally never happens for real in real life. It's always a scam. And I think people just need a healthy dose of skepticism as they sort of traverse on.
Yeah, I agree with Julian, and I was talking to someone the other day about this very topic, and frankly, I don't think there's a all-in-one solution. I think it takes a multi-factored approach, multi-layered, holistic approach. I don't think there's anything out there that one device or one thing that can fully protect you. We're seeing people that have, rock star backup plans, incident response plans, and the like, VPNs or the like. So going back to what I said earlier, I think it takes a holistic approach, doing the proper assessment, and relying on everything, all the tools that are at your disposal.
We can provide some digital asset security basics, because I once got hacked, and when I was on a flight, my phone number got ported, and the hacker got control of my phone, and with that, two-factor authentication via your mobile phone device is just a really bad idea, because then they unlock my email address, and with my email address, they're able to unlock a number of cryptocurrency accounts. And so with that, go to your phone provider after this and tell them don't allow a porting of your phone number no matter what. So that's number one. And number two, don't do two-factor authentication via your mobile phone. I use something simple like Google Authenticator, works really well. And then with respect to digital assets, the basics like using a hardware wallet, using a digital asset specific PC or laptop where you're not downloading other stuff that could be like logging your passwords or something like that. And so you really got to be careful every step of the way, especially since digital assets are in the hundreds of billions of dollars in value these days, or in a bull market goes over $1 trillion. So there's a lot at stake. So people need to get very clever, and there's a lot of process with respect to protecting digital assets.
Thanks for that. This is a question I just love talking about, and I think of the nation states, but also we're not dealing with like script kiddies or really simple, cyber criminals. Sometimes we are, but with ransomware as a service, crime as a service, online marketplaces we were talking about to sell these stolen credentials or whatever, we're not talking about just simple attacks. Like any one of us can go online and complete a fairly sophisticated attack with just a little bit of money and a little bit of knowledge, and that's a real risk to consumers and businesses. One of the panels earlier mentioned just the sheer number of small and medium businesses in Calgary, Canada, that don't have IT departments or don't have cybersecurity professionals, and not to their own fault, but it's trying to figure out the ways that we can, and I say we both from a law enforcement perspective, but as citizens' perspective, and how do we, or a cybersecurity perspective, how do we prevent that? How do we create some.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. It ties into what Julian said about a lot of these hacks, probably the majority of them at least, come from nation states. I don't know if that stat is true. I would say it is, at least accurate at least. But boiling it down to how we can protect ourselves locally, there's a myriad of things out there that you can do. The simple, Google search, right? There's VPNs, VLANs, virtual local area networks that are really good for protecting against nation state attacks. But again, go back to it has to be a holistic, multi-layered approach. There's not going to be one simple solution to protecting your IoT or your smart edge devices. Depending on who you work for and what you do for work, like you're in policing, and you're in banking. So we're all going to have different devices that we're trying to protect, right? So it can't be a cookie cutter approach, I guess. But
what's frightening to see is some of these ransomware attacks where they lock out the system and demand exorbitant sums to unlock it. So one method of vaccinating your system from that is just to back everything up constantly. So if something were to happen to your IT, you get locked out, you can at least restart from something.
We were talking, I was talking with the gentleman at lunch about, and not to go down a totally different panel, but mandatory reporting requirements around attacks. And one thing I think that whether anybody's for or against it, one thing I think it would help people realize is that we've all been victims, or at least potential victims, of ransomware, phishing, whatever it is. And so it just maybe helps all of us advocate for each other. And this is where we've had some also good discussions on lunch, just about when people are competitors in business and when they should need to be working together, right? Like whether it's physical security or cybersecurity, there's a lot that can be done when organizations, even if competitors in most of business, can work together to prevent ransomware, phishing, to help with edge security. Sorry.
Yeah, I totally agree, and you probably know this better than I from policing, but I've always said that if you can have some threat intelligence sharing models for cybersecurity, and I'm fully cognizant that cybersecurity is a big word. I often find that people confuse what cybersecurity is, but yeah, if somebody could create a threat intelligence sharing model very similar to what the police use with CPIC, right? The CPIC and Pros. Unless you're in policing, you probably don't know what that stands for, but it's the Canadian Police Information Center. And if you could create some sort of a information sharing database where, if say your company is attacked or a person is attacked, that information is aggregated and shared across different platforms. I think that's, maybe a little bit futuristic, but for myself, knowing about CPIC and how it helps policing, maybe, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, that's a really great point, and I think I've heard that comment in a few different ways, just around venture capital and building business in Alberta and how people find the right information. We talked about it with regard to crypto or blockchain training. It's making sure people can find the right valuable, proper information, as opposed to Googling, where should I put all my money, and hoping the right result comes up, right? So, I think to put plugs out for some good things that the federal government does around the Canadian Center for Cybersecurity, and then there's, NIST in the US, which is our next question, a good segue into it, thank you. But, and then things like the MITRE ATT&CK framework, there's lots of there's good options out there, but I don't know that they're easy to find, or that people know, whether it's consumers, hey, I know I need to go to this website to find out, information on how to protect myself or whatever, or whether it's businesses, the same thing, right?
One issue is that some of these attacks are happening in such high frequency that it can be difficult for a centralized database to keep up with it. So I like, following people on Twitter and trying to see, what's happening in digital asset hacks this week or today, and seeing those case studies and learning from them, what not to do or where the vulnerabilities lie, how these attacks happen. Was it a user mistake? Was it a phishing attack? Is it some sort of infrastructure that they were or were not using? You can learn from that and adapt.
This pace is a challenge for sure, and we see that with, 1 week it can be heavily grandparent scams, and then the next week it's a romance scam or a CRA scam, or whatever it is. It changes all the time, and I've been reading about how AI is unfortunately helping these people as well, the criminals as well, to adapt their messaging quicker and our messaging and tactics. So yeah, it's a challenge to keep up with it for sure.
There's a psychological aspect, like you said, either, it's like some sort of romantic connection, or some of the times they try to encourage you to make a mistake via FOMO, act now in the next minute or you'll miss out. And that's when people make mistakes, when they're rushed and they're not thinking and not going through their checklist of things not to do, and they just slip up.
And speaking of the scams, that's a good example of phishing scams. We're even seeing phishing scams, which are more around voice mimicking, right? Voicemail and the like. So it's not coming through an email. So and with the new rise with ChatGPT and Jasper and a few, not to call them out, but a few AI models, it's easier now than ever to mimic someone's voice. And I was at a conference in Edmonton last week with ASIS International. And one of the presenters gave an example of somebody actually used an artificial intelligence model to mimic somebody's voice, the daughter's voice, called the parents, and it was, the presenter was like, you would never have been able to tell the difference. So yeah, again, going back to the speed of innovation on Deerfoot, I think that's unfortunately where we're headed, and keeping abreast with the pace is definitely tough, especially in the startup world.
it's tough to say I'm taking Deerfoot at the wrong times because there's no innovation on Deerfoot and there's no speed on Deerfoot. But, except in the middle of the night, maybe.
I'll show you where later.
Okay, sounds good. We'll do that after. Perfect. I'll pop into the next question. We're kind of touching on a few of these already, so it's great. We'll bounce back and forth. And so the next one, it says in February of 2023, the U.S. National Institute for Standards and Technology, NIST, launched a new encryption standard for IoT communication. They've actually been working towards this for quite a while. There's a lot of work going into it for sure. So connection between devices and databases, it says, is better encryption the solution to edge security or just part of the equation? We've talked about some of this already.
Yeah, I don't think it's, I mean, more encryption. I think everything that we're touching is practically encrypted. I can't say no, but that would, from my personal opinion, I don't think more encryption is going to hurt, but again, I don't think it's going to solve the entire problem. Going back to what I've said now a couple times is, having a multi-layered approach, right? Yeah, I think that it's, to the end of your question there, it's part of the equation, it's not the solution. I think we need to have a bit more holistic approach to cybersecurity, which entails information security, which is my specialty as a lead implementer with ISO, the standards with ISO, very similar to NIST. Yeah, I'll leave it there for you.
Yeah, my concern with respect to cryptographic systems is the speed and the pace of quantum computing development, such that these supercomputers in the future have the potential to crack some of this cryptography that's around today. And it's not something that is happening right now or in the next 5 years, but with the pace of innovation in quantum computing, that could be something that's in play in the next 10 to 20 years. And it could be another cat and mouse game where we're constantly upgrading the cryptography and all these security systems to keep up with sort of the tools that the bad guys have.
Yeah, that's absolutely a valid point, and I think of probably even worse with edge devices where we all update hopefully our PCs every day or automatically, but to admit a vulnerability in my house, the $20 light bulbs I bought off Amazon that go to some weird website, those aren't getting firmware updates very often, or my stove is not getting firmware updates. So when we look at lightweight cryptography that's hopefully protecting these devices now, as the new ones come out 2 years from now, is anybody going to update them if they still have those devices, right?
Yeah, or do we need to be concerned about Amazon or Google and what they're listening to on their home speakers, right? Are they recording us when we don't know it? Because a lot of people have those in their kitchen and they're just sort of these ubiquitous objects. But or they get taken over by unsuspecting hackers or someone trying to attack you and steal data that way.
The last panel was talking about government procurement, which is super fun. But the pace of, so switching to business, thinking of the pace of some businesses update their, whether it's edge devices probably less regularly than their desktop machines or whatever, right? So my mind's bouncing around to a ton of different areas, but like the supply chain and the procurement processes and the vendor contracts to make sure we're getting these things evergreened properly, updated properly, all that kind of stuff can potentially pose a bigger risk on edge devices than some machines that we update every couple of years anyway. Any further thoughts on that?
Yeah, totally. I think we could give examples all day long, but I got a phone call from a friend of mine in Edmonton last night that works in the auto industry, and their dealership was completely crippled and hacked. And what you were saying about going back to the corporations, you have to be a little bit more. I think it's a little bit utopian to just think that updating your policies and procedures is going to help you. I'm a policy and procedure guy, being with an implementer with ISO. That is an information security management system framework that we preach. But even that alone isn't going to solve all the problems. And listening to the friend last night speak to, I guess one of my first questions was, so what did you have in place? Oh, it's nothing. We never thought we'd ever. We're a car dealership, we never thought we'd ever get attacked. Well, the attackers are getting smarter, right? They're not coming out with, these, ransomware requests where it's too much. They know exactly your threshold. It's almost like they've studied, right? They know exactly what you're willing to pay almost. Even in the insurance industry, the insurance agents are seeing that as well, where they'll write a policy and then all of a sudden they'll see, you know, tax coming in and it's, you know, right around the amount where it's too much to investigate, you pay it out, right, and cancel policy type thing, so, yeah.
Yeah, the criminals on ransomware seem to know they've done their research the right amount, right? So $1 million is a ton of money to one company, but way too much to another, and they seem to just find that, unfortunately, that sweet spot, right? So, yeah, absolutely. I'll pop into the next question and maybe back a little bit to the NIST framework a little bit later as well, but just talking about the human side of things as well, which we've talked about here. So according to IBM, 90% of security breaches have a human error component. What are the risks to edge security of social engineering, phishing against users, and any good recommendations for edge cyber hygiene? This calls here, but whether it's edge or desktop devices, any thoughts?
Yeah, where do you start? There's just so many vulnerabilities and potential attacks. Just had a phishing email come through earlier this week, and it was a very clever fake invoice from a service provider that we actually use. And so it's always helpful to have someone double check everything. It's like you have an invoice or anything of concern, get a second person to look at it and be like, hey, did you actually send this email? Or whenever doing, one that I like to do personally is when doing a digital asset transaction. I'm always scared of sending it to the wrong address and then it's gone forever, which thankfully has never happened, but I always have someone looking over my shoulder, double checking everything, so it helps to have checklists, it helps to have the buddy system where you have people double checking everything, and then just the basics and the too good to be true dynamic, and I think that's how the majority of phishing attacks happen. However, with respect to digital asset transactions and smart contracts, specifically on Ethereum and other blockchains, they can be incredibly difficult to understand. And I think people do digital asset transactions that they don't fully understand because they can't audit the contract. So with respect to digital assets, say there's a new NFT or something coming out, it's a new mint. I have some rules. I say never be first. Always make sure other people are doing it first, because it's the first ones that go down and get scammed. So if you see other people safely doing it, then I mean that's not the only check, but it's just a basic one. And take your time. Always do your research. Always do your due diligence. Never be forced into something, because if you have that FOMO and this limited time commitment, more often than not, people make mistakes there, and I think it's best to just stay out of it. Most of these phishing attacks are just something that the person gets tricked into doing themselves. So if you do nothing, then you're typically fine.
Yeah, I think it's also gaining that buy-in from the C-suite and putting in a robust training program. And I know that sounds a bit topical for a startup that can't afford something like that, but there's consultants out there that can put forward a really good cybersecurity program or training program that you can revisit on a yearly basis, semi-annual basis, what have you. We do that all the time. So I think going into first attacking at a training and an awareness level, and then going in and implementing as many controls as possible. I know I've hit it a couple times, but for me, it all starts with that information security. Building out those policies and procedures. You can't manage what isn't measured. I know I've beat that metaphor as a dead horse, but you can't manage what isn't measured. You can't breach what isn't, applied as law or as principle in a policy, right? So making sure you have the policies, and then if you do have an employee that has gone rogue, and quite frankly, we've seen many attacks not be from nation states, from somebody within, right? And so putting those things in place that you can then go back and audit at a different date, for me, that's probably one of the strongest things that I would recommend.
And I think just starting out having the systems and the infrastructure in place just to prevent any sort of security breaches, whether that's multi-signature systems and various pieces of hardware to protect you, and then physical security as well. That's the most basic. Lock important things up, have be in a good building with good security as well. So you can't forget the physical side of things.
You can't at all, and you're not beating a dead horse. It is super important, and like I think of things like two-person control, or two people signing the checks, or those segmentation of duties, all that kind of stuff. Because the reality is, I mean, there's lots of criminals that are willing to take our money overseas, but there are people inside our own organizations at times, whether a bad actor or just not well trained or aware of being phished or sharing their credentials or whatever it might be. There's all those different potentials. So it's all of this together, right? The physical security, the policies and procedures, finding the right resources too, to go back to, like, although large corporations can be a victim as well, they've got big departments of policy writers and IT security that can help out. I really do worry about the smaller businesses that don't have that, right? Their IT department is one. Being able to find those right resources like we talked about, right? Whether it's online resources, whether it's government or private organizations or whatever that can help in the right ways.
Yeah, totally. I absolutely agree. And I see that all the time where, the pain point for the smaller business is that they don't have the revenue cap to, or a budget to go in and build a holistic, really good information security management system or a cybersecurity system, right? It's all on the same topic, same umbrella. And so one of the things that I've strived to do as an advisor specifically to startups in cybersecurity is helping them, build benchmarks. I did this with Grey Wolf Analytics that I chair their advisory board out of Fredericton. Is they were a startup in blockchain analytics, and so they wanted to make sure that they had a very robust cyber security system in place. Being in this space, right? They know working in this environment that they're going to be susceptible to hacks and the like. So I wouldn't, I guess in a nutshell, I wouldn't let the size of your business hinder you from reaching out. Yeah, you might not be a $100 million empire or a company that can afford to hire people full time, but there's tons of advisors out there, good quality advisors that are working off of NIST, that are working off of ISO. And there's other MSSP providers, Arctic Wolf, and a few others that highly recommend.
Yeah, and you made me think there of, just to put a plug for my own organization, like we've got a big team, a huge team for a municipal police agency of really smart investigators, analysts, IT experts, but we can't do it alone, far from it. And so we've been trying as best we can to partner with other organizations, not-for-profits, the federal government. ASC is an example, just people I think of that have expertise in those different niche areas to investigate or solve or try to prevent as best we can each of these incidents. So back to that first panel of the day on collaboration. It's not just in in small business as well, right? It's in law enforcement. So I'll pop into the last question, and then we'll have time for some questions after that. Alberta has a thriving IoT ecosystem that's created groundbreaking innovation, and it's starting to gain new international attention. What would you point to as Alberta's biggest edge success stories?
Personally, for me, I think oil and gas gets enough honk. So I would give a solid honk to the smart ag sector, agriculture in Alberta. We're seeing leaps and bounds in technology helping out, smart farms and the like. I never treat be referring to farms as smart farms, but healthcare and wearables, we're seeing a tremendous breakthrough in those devices and technologies. Smart cities, you're seeing smart cities now, not to be confused with the infamous 15-minute city. But smart cities, and where you're seeing remote monitoring of systems and lighting and heating and the like. And then the final one for me is seeing Bitcoin mining. I think that's maybe the unsung hero. Maybe I was speaking with a gentleman, Jeremy, he's somewhere here in the audience from Regina. But anyway, we're seeing Bitcoin mining going in and powering generating systems where they're now running complete businesses off the power systems that are being generated. So I think there's a lot to answer your question. I think there's maybe 4 there that I've highlighted.
What's really cool about putting Calgary specifically and Alberta in general is that can-do Western Canadian entrepreneurial spirit. It's really a history of entrepreneurship in this province, and you're seeing it in a lot of sectors, and it's not just the entrepreneurs, and I see a lot in fintech and crypto. It's also has to be government facilitated. From my perspective, I think the Alberta government and the Securities Commission is very good at fostering innovation in fintech and cryptocurrency. I look at other jurisdictions and other regulatory bodies, specifically the SEC of the US, and their attitude is basically shut everything down, no innovation. And it's great to be in a province that really tries to foster that, tries to grow the economy, because they know that they need to diversify beyond just oil and gas, which is a great industry, but we need more than that. So it's good to be leading in these other sectors and segments. It's not just the entrepreneurs, which are obviously extremely important, but you need to be in the right regulatory environment as well, and that's really top-down driven. So those are some really important factors.
I want to throw, I didn't have a great answer for this because I'm not in business, but I'm going to reveal too much personal information and say craft breweries. I was talking to an entrepreneur whose taps and kegs are better connected than my house for sure. So I don't know, that's the one I can throw in. But from a more serious perspective, one of the things I hope that Alberta can use as an advantage is it being a safe space. Obviously we're well connected and the rest of the world can reach out and take some of our money if they really want to or whatever, but I think to speak to a local, provincial and national law enforcement perspective, if there's ways that law enforcement, maybe somewhat like government, although I don't know that I certainly don't speak for government, can be a partner in that, whether it's for the prevention or the reactive part as well, right? We're certainly not the ones that can come into a big business and fix the ransomware all the time or whatever, but if there are ways that we can make those connections or have those partnerships that help those organizations, I think just in helping Alberta be a safe space for that as well. I don't know how much we're good. Yeah, we can turn to questions. Perfect, yeah. Any questions in the audience?
I have one, sorry. As usual, this is a softball, easy question, I promise. Would the panel support criminally charging corporations that pay ransomware as a way to prevent it from continuing? If you don't pay, they don't continue the business.
That's not an easy question at all.
You said it was softball. Is that Peter? No.
I'm
not taking questions from Peter.
Challenge.
What I think is a fun debate is the debate around mandatory reporting requirements for ransomware or other sort of hacks. And there's no good answer on either side of it, but there are some things that reporting requirements might help with. It might help people understand that we're all potential victims of it. It also helps, the smart people in my shop have been part of some international investigations where major ransomware investigations, and they're all over the internet, have been stopped because of one or two organizations that has reported it. Reported those indicators of compromise and said, here's the IP address or wallet address or how our credentials got stolen. And then we've been able to take that, and I don't mean we just as a municipal agency, but law enforcement as a whole have been able to take that and make a huge difference towards future victimization. So when I talk about kind of that community good that organizations can do, again, I'm certainly not going to attempt to sway anybody on the reporting of crypto attacks or not, but or cyber attacks or not, but I think there's a ton of benefit to that. So that's a total way around your question. Any other questions?
There it comes. See, it's hard, eh?
Very bad thrower. Is this working?
Yep, you got it.
Bad thrower. You touched on AI as part of the discussion, and I think that some of the unknowns of AI or some of the risks that are attached to it, and I feel that regulation is like a good bit behind where AI is going, and I just from your perspective, as you touched on it as a panel, I just wanted to get your perspective on what real risks are attached to it and what we should be doing as any entity to kind of mitigate some of that.
I'm happy for either of you if you want.
Yeah, I think that's a deep well to answer that one. I mean, the risks are, fraud, I guess is the first thing that comes to mind, right? And yeah, you're gonna see with AI, unless we put the brakes on a little bit, again, in my personal opinion, I think there's a lot of stuff that has to be done before we see that rapidly adopted, and frankly, people are adopting that now. Everybody's using AI, it seems, more and more recently in the last even 6 months, right? With ChatGPT and Jasper AI and all of these other things. I self-admittedly use them on a daily basis, but plagiarism is another one. Like, you can go so far down this rabbit hole on the risks, and I don't, frankly, to be honest with you, I don't know on the development side what is being done to, in the algorithms and stuff. So I can't even speak to what is being done with AI to secure. I really don't know.
And AI in general is just moving at hyperspeed. The regulators are way, way behind. I think it definitely needs to be regulated immediately. And the cat's out of the bag. You can't, I don't think you can pause it or stop doing it. And there's a ton of different implications from frauds and scams to copyrights and ripping off intellectual property. I've seen one controversy last week was someone created a song with Drake in it that was completely AI generated, and now there's all these copyright issues and things of that nature. And so it seems like you can create all these various media, whether it's film or pictures or songs, that are just invented, not by the asset owner, but someone who's good on their computer.
Yeah, that's a great question. And others have talked today about the pace of adoption of crypto and blockchain technology, and AI seems to be happening way quicker in the current climate. The best answer I have is back to that first panel of the day around collaboration. Same thing, there's lots of spaces here where we can compete on things, but there's times when we need to work together too, whether it's on getting the right regulation, whether it's getting the right, decisions before the courts, or, talk about, interesting, for AI, I mean, we talk a lot within law enforcement around ethics around it, ethical decision making around it, because the courts haven't given us an answer yet. So we're going to make a decision on a case that involves AI now and make an arrest or lay a charge or something like that potentially that won't be decided for 2-3 years down the line, and then we'll get the answer on it, which is way too late, right? So the best I can go with is collaboration there for sure.
Thanks.
Anybody else got any questions? Oh, we got one run right over here in the front.
Got one there too.
Actually, we got a couple.
Hey, the panel's been talking a lot about, I guess digital asset, cryptocurrency risks involved in hacking, and I know you guys are covering more topics like that, but it seems that when I got either fraud or hacked, it was my bank, and it was mostly traditional fiat banking systems that are getting attacked. I'm curious to know if you have any kind of statistics on the percentage of hacks that are happening on, let's say, the traditional finance industry versus, the crypto industry. Because I think in crypto, everybody sees those big hacks, often bridges, etc. And those numbers are astronomical, but I have to think that it pales in comparison to, what the traditional banks are losing every single day to hackers.
How about the $100 million of gold stolen from the Pearson airport a week ago?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't have any numbers prepared for you, but there's fraud everywhere. It unfortunately doesn't matter, where it, criminals will find a way, right? When there's an earthquake in some foreign country, all of a sudden there's a bunch of scam websites within minutes and stuff. And so it's pretty sad. And I think what, and this is just me outgoing some of the good ideas from the panels earlier today, is just finding ways to build trust, finding ways to build collaboration, finding ways to the right regulation that help all of that. I sadly don't know that we'll ever stop all of it, but it's a good question for sure.
Yeah, I would love to know that stat too, and honestly, I think that it's happening in such a, I know this sounds a little bit doomsday and not to be negative and end on a negative note, but it does happen so much that stat would have to require a full-time person updating it. Yeah.
I think monetary scams or just issues far outweigh anything happening on the digital asset side. One example that could be to mention is just quantitative easing by the government. That's what was like $8 trillion of money printing. So just that in and of itself will pale over any sort of cryptocurrency fraud. It's, just exceptional and some true.
Thread you pulled right through there at the end.
Some hard money advocates, Bitcoiners, and gold bugs would, claim the government's, the central banks are a scam, right? So who knows? It all depends on your definition.
One more question down here.
Thanks. I wanted to ask if you could elaborate a bit on what you meant by holistic approach, and maybe take like a holistic logic to understanding the motivation of attacks. I know it's clear that people want money, and that when there's money to be stolen, that there will be a motive there, but I think that there might be a bit more of a holistic perspective to motivation, generally speaking. And also, this is one for the group, for impersonations, for the way people use AI to commit impersonations and sort of attack your friends with that. I think that I wanted to ask if anyone's familiar with the technology or a method that people use to take that control into their own, take that issue into their own control by broadcasting something like a watermark on their digital broadcasts to authenticate that this is the real communication from like the correct office, the correct person. It's coming from the correct number. It's not an impersonation. So that if it doesn't have sort of that verification in a digital signature sense, that we can know that it's not coming from the correct source. If anyone's heard of something like that, or if something works.
Someone with less ADD than me, because I forgot the first part already.
I'll repeat it. It's about the holistic approach to
Okay.
motivation. Oh, I wanted to also sort of table out there the possibility of surveillance capitalism being part of the problem. With the fact that
We're going super big here right at the end.
We can,
the fact
let's
that
part-
hackers can get better and better guesses at how to attack because of the existence of all that info, because of surveillance capitalism.
Wouldn't surveillance prevent this? Because in my opinion, these crimes happen when the criminal feels that they can't get caught. So if everyone's being monitored, then it seems like it's lower probability, but it's not really a society that anyone wants to promote.
I was just thinking, this is all fun conversation. We're going to have to cancel the gala to keep this going for a few more hours, if that's okay. Partially to your question and then to yours, I was just thinking to put in a brief plug for the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre, which is a good sort of location to go and find, and they may even have that sort of stat on method of payment, right? And a huge portion of them are in crypto, but there's probably still some check cashing scams out there or whatever. So that's probably a good location for that, and maybe that partially dips into your question about a holistic approach as well, is just finding a way to share the right amount of information so that we can all not be victims. Right?
Yeah, speaking of the motive piece, I don't know what the motive would be. I mean, outside of financial motive. I mentioned I was at that conference in Edmonton last week with ASIS, and one of the presenters, a cybersecurity expert out of, I believe, Los Angeles, he gave this presentation of a real-time case that they actually did, and they decided to set up a video camera in front of the computer of this hack that happened on I was telling Phil down in the green room, on a national company worth hundreds of millions. So they set up this camera, and we got to watch it. The entire audience got to watch it last week, and it was on the dark web. Somebody hacked into this company and was auctioning off the company in real time to bidders, and you could see the cursor going into the QuickBooks. Here, and the chat log was, this is their QuickBooks, this is their checking, this is their savings account, here's their employees, here's where you can skim some money with low risk of detection for the first 3 months, then go hardcore, you can completely bankrupt the company overnight on this date. And I mean, this was as real as the nose on your face. Like, we were watching it, and it was shocking. So frankly, I think the motive might be just financial, and it's easy, and you don't have to go to work every day like the majority of us here. Going back to I think the 7th or 8th question on the holistic stuff, or was it the 9th? I'm just spending it. On the holistic side is, I guess what I meant by that in the presentation, in the speak here, is that, you know, for me, I see cybersecurity, it drives me crazy when people just talk about cybersecurity as that buzzword. Because what are you talking about, right? Cybersecurity, it is so vast, it is so huge of a topic. And for me, in information security, I go, well, wait a minute, like what we're doing over here, like I think we need to remove those silos. And the day that we remove those silos and we're talking about information security and cybersecurity as a holistic approach, because so many people will go and say, well, I need an MSSP provider for virtual VPNs, VLANs, and the like, remote detection, threat intelligence analysis, all those different buzzwords and those things that you can do, and then they forget the information security stuff. I've walked into several companies and you do a gap assessment, a gap analysis, and it's what policies and procedures do you have in place? Zero, right? So there's a zero policies, zero procedures for any employee touching anything. And for ISO and NIST, the policies and procedures, every single thing that you touch in a company, bring your own device, email retention, password policy, all those things must require a policy, right? So that's what I was referring to when I mentioned holistic. Hopefully that answers it.
I think I understand what you meant a little bit better. Thanks.
How are we doing? Time for one more? Should we wrap up? Oh, we got one more over here. Fantastic.
Peter's being quiet.
He is. He's playing nice at the end of the day.
I just have a question for Julian. Going back to what you were talking about with quantum computing and the introduction of quantum computing in recent years to come, or in years to come, sorry. Would it be, could we say that we would see cyber threats and attacks that for the first while we can't quite defend ourselves from? Is that something safe to say?
Well, I think that security professionals, definitely need to track the progress of quantum computing as these threats emerge. The cryptographic methods just need to improve along with the tools that are used to break them. Right? And I view quantum computing as one of the most powerful tools coming up over the next, decade or two that can affect those systems, and everything's encrypted. So the stakes are high. And that being said, like security professionals and people building up the infrastructure, they just need to be aware of it and be one step ahead, basically.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. That was a fantastic, intense topic to get this all at the end of the day. Thank you all for we made it through day one. Jams packed our heads full of information. For any of you seeing us at the gala tonight, it's at 6:30, and it's not here. It's at the Brownstone, which is on the corner of McLeod and 10th. There's parking on the street in front, as well as in the parking lot across the street. On your way out, please drop off these at the front desk, because we want to recycle these. We want to be able to use them for tomorrow, so that way we can be efficient, no waste. And also for anyone who's joining us and everyone who's joining us tomorrow, we'll be here at 10 a.m. So we'll see you again, reasonably bright, reasonably early, for another fantastic day, jam full of information. Thank you so much. Have a great evening.